This is the tale of Elric before he was called Womanslayer, before the final collapse of Melniboné. This is the tale of his rivalry with his cousin Yrkun and his love of his cousin Cimmeril, before that rivalry and that love brought Emir, the Dreaming City, crashing in flames, raped by the reavers of the Young Kingdoms. This is the tale of two black swords, Stormbringer and Mournblade, and how they were discovered and what part they played in the destiny of Elric and Melniboné, a destiny which was to shape a larger destiny, that of the world itself. This is the tale of when Elric was king, the commander of dragons, fleets, and all the folks of that half-human race which had ruled the world for 10,000 years. This is a tale of tragedy. This tale of Melniboné, the Dragon Isle. This is a tale of a monstrous emotions and high ambitions. This is a tale of sorcery and treacheries and worthy ideals, of agonies and fearful pleasures, of bitter love and sweet hatred. This is the tale of Elric of Melniboné. Much of it Elric himself was to remember, only in his nightmares. Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we talk about gaming and things that we love, things that inspire, and things that bring us beauty and joy. And that, dear listener, is the Chronicle of the Black Sword. This is from Elric of Melniboné, the first of the Elric stories, although not first chronologically anymore. And with that, we're going to start off our discussion of sword and sorcery. I'm going to start doing that every June because it's a genre that I love. And Elric was actually the first sword and sorcery I ever read. In fact, that story, Elric of Melniboné, was the first sword and sorcery I ever had encountered. And it just gripped me. It, for me, is as evocative as Hero Prince before the seas swallowed Atlantis. There was an aged undreamed of. The opening of the Numidian Chronicles for Conan. So, if you want to know more about what sword and sorcery is, you can go check out our backlog of Behind the Screen, where I do a breakdown of sword and sorcery, what it is, why it's important, why it's cool. But today we're talking about Elric, and more importantly, we're talking about a game that is clearly inspired by Elric, a small little game by the Merry Mushmen called The Black Sword Hack. And I've got images to show. We're going to show off the PDF here, but it is a game based around the evocative nature of Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné and the Eternal Champion series, Corum, Hawkmoon, and the Eternal Champion. So this is a game I picked up. I saw it on Instagram, and I bought the PDF because of the images. Like, the artwork alone caused me to want to buy this book. And then I got it in. I was not expecting a small, slim game like this, which I like. And the Merry Mushmen also sent the first episode, or issue 0 of their Chaos Crier zine, which is just fantastic. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the Black Sword Hack, why it's so important. But the thing you got to remember about Elric is that Elric is coming out of a time when high fantasy is just getting started, but also sword and sorcery is at its height. We have Conan. We have the writings of Clark Ashton Smith. We have Tolkien kind of doing his own thing and Lord Dunsany doing his own thing. And we have this guy who's editing these pulp magazines, Michael Moorcock. And he's looking around at all of the different characters, Kane, Conan, Solomon Kane, and he sees all of these heroes, Aragorn, sort of cut from the same mold. The strong warrior king, or the warrior who would be king. Barbarians who or those who are on the outside fighting against decadent civilizations with, strength of arms, mighty thews, as Conan would, or as Howard would have wrote. And he wanted to turn the whole thing on its head. As he even has said, he was sort of a rebel and an iconoclast at that time. Yeah, Dunsany's not sword and sorcery, but neither is Tolkien, right? Both of those guys fall into sort of the epic fantasy genre. or some of Dunsany does. Dunsany is just beautiful. We'll probably have to do an episode on Dunsany alone at some point. And so he conceives of the inverse, the anti-Conan, although I don't know that he would have come up with that title, feeling very derivative as it does even to say. But Elric is not a barbarian. Elric sits in the seat of the decadent civilization. In fact, it's not even a human civilization. It is... Melnibonéans are descended from dragons. They are barely human. Their passions are far worse, far more terrible. And Elric is emperor, but also, unlike Conan, who fights through his... fights through the world of the Hyborian Age with steel and reflexes and strength of limb. Elric is weak. He's an albino. He can barely stand sometimes. He's given to great sweeps of lethargy. He's a sorcerer. So unlike Conan and other sword and sorcery genres where the sorcery is typically the enemy, this is Conan, or this is Elric. He is possessed of great power of mind and spirit, and weak of limb, and also I would argue weak of will. Conan's will is what sees him through. Elric's will is what gets him and all those he loved killed by the sword Stormbringer. And you can't separate Elric from Stormbringer, this demonic blade that is the servant of chaos, this blade that eats the souls of those it kills and channels that vitality into Elric, allowing him to be the warrior that he is called to be, wants to be. Little digression there. John Doom, the Bloody Nine is a great sword. I would actually argue that Grimdark is the direct heir of the sword and sorcery genre, whereas high fantasy is the direct heir of the epic fantasy genre. If you read Joe Abercrombie, specifically The Heroes, I think is a good one, and the First Law trilogy. Not so much, obviously, the Age of Madness trilogy, because then we hit the Industrial Age. But those really feel sword and sorcery. Richard Morgan, who did the Altered Carbon series, has the first book is called The Steel Remains, and is a great modern sword and sorcery, grimdark sort of trilogy. Also, I don't know if you heard, John, but the Bloody Nine, maybe not the Bloody Nine, but they're in talks of doing Best Served Cold as either a movie or a television show starring Rebecca Ferguson. And I cannot wait. I would say that Best Served Cold and The Heroes are probably my two favorite Abercrombie books. Joe Abercrombie, not Abercrombie and Fitch. Hey Rook, good to see you. So, the Black Sword Hack. Let's get into it. First of all, this art is amazing. So we're going to talk a little about the mechanics today. Today is all the player-focused stuff, and the Black Sword Hack is very player-focused. It is a game that, when I read, I almost didn't want to try. Because all of the rules are player-facing. Meaning you, as the player, you roll to hit, you roll to dodge. The GM doesn't roll any dice, save for the setup, which excuse me, which has I don't know if I've talked a lot about Numenera, but that was my big thing I did not like about Numenera towards the end of my campaign, the fact that I didn't really get to roll dice except for the setup of the campaign. But they do some things that fixes the what I did not like about Numenera. Monsters, if they outlevel you, apply a penalty or cause you to roll, add to your roll, because if a monster outlevels you, it's more difficult to hit and to defend against it. So it's all player facing, but more along the lines of Symbaroum, where the creatures the GM picks affects the player's rolls. It also has a great character sheet. It's just a single quarter page of a normal piece of paper with a black sword running through it. It is based off D&D, so it has our 6 attributes, but they use them in a different way. You roll 2d6 for all of your attributes, and instead of that being your attribute, it instead gives you a range between 8 and 13. Because in this game, you're always rolling under your attribute. And one thing to point out is you never roll equal to. It's always under. So if you have an attribute of, you have a strength of 13, you need a 12 or less to succeed. 1s are critical hits, 20s are fumbles. And that's the entirety of the game. Like I said, if you're fighting a monster 2 levels above you, you roll your d20 and add 2 to it, because if it pushes you over, you fail to hit. Character creation is very slick and evocative. The war between law and chaos with neutrality in the middle is sort of front and center to this game. So we're going to flip through it. We're going to talk about it real quick. And then on Tuesday, we're going to discuss the great tools that the GMs have while running this game. And the thing that impresses me most about this game is this thing is 108 pages. That's it. And I had to split my review up into 2 sections. So as we flip through this, you can see the art is just gorgeous. Evocative art throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to scroll through here real quick, get to some more art, and we're going to talk about options. So as you are playing through the Black Hack, when you sit down to make your character, your first choice after you roll your attributes is your background. You come from one of 3 backgrounds. Are you a barbarian? Are you a member of the civilized society? Or are you a member of the decadent race? That lets you roll a d20 to see where you were born. So some of my players have great things like, I have a barbarian who was born among your picked brothers and sisters after a bloody battle. That one sounds kind of familiar. In a civilized kingdom, but traded as a hostage. The decadent origins allow someone to be born in a disreputable brothel in the city of thieves, or in the necropolis where you were raised by goats. Ghosts, not raised by goats. That is a completely different movie. And then you're forced to stare at them, and it's just not great. And then once you do that, you get to pick 3 backgrounds. And backgrounds are things that give you a little bit of class, some mechanics. So perhaps you're an assassin. If you attack first, you deal damage equal to your dexterity attribute as opposed to the die that you roll. Maybe you are a shaman and start with pacts with spirits, or have forbidden knowledge and get 4 randomly selected spells. Maybe you're a sophist and can make someone believe a blatant lie if you succeed at a charisma check. It lasts 1 hour. Each of your 3 backgrounds give you +1 to an attribute. And then you write down your last couple of stats. Unless you have a background that says otherwise, your unarmed damage only does a d4, and your weapon damage, no matter what you're wielding, does a d6. 2-handed weapons let you roll that d6 with advantage, but still, d4, d6 feels very basic, expert kind of D&D, where every damage dies are a d6 and monsters have a d8 hit points. Your hit points are always equal to your constitution, and you get this cool mechanic called the Doom die. Because Doom is something that hangs over all of our heroes' heads in the Black Sword hack. Some of your attributes require, or some of your backgrounds require, that you just roll to check your Doom die. It starts off at a d6. And the way it works is, if you roll your Doom die, you get whatever the value is, but if you roll a 1 or a 2, it drops to a d4. If you roll again a 1 or a 2, your Doom die goes away for the rest of the adventure, and you roll with disadvantage because now fate is against you. So there are some times you have to roll it. Sometimes your backgrounds require it. If you roll a natural 20, you have to check your Doom die. If you want to take the same action in a turn, you get 2 actions every turn. So if you want to attack twice or move twice, you have to check your Doom die. But also, you can roll your Doom die to reduce a roll that you've just made. Did you miss it by 1 or 2, or you really need to succeed? You can roll your Doom die and reduce what you rolled by that amount. Very simple mechanic. And a lot of things use this, what they call the usage die. So supplies, you've got a usage die of D6. Every time you need to check supplies, you roll the D6, and on a 1 or a 2, it drops to a D4. If you need to check it again and you roll a 1 or a 2, it goes away. And that's the entirety of character creation. You get to roll twice on a random table to see what your starting gear is. You get some cash based off your background. Money in this game is strange. You start with coins, but essentially there are some things that cost a D6 coins, some things that cost a D6 times 10 coins, and some things that cost a D6 times 100. And every time you go to look, the GM rolls to see how much that thing costs. So maybe one of your fellow adventurers gets lucky and can find a suit of armor for 100 gold coins, and you go to look for something and it's 400 and out of your price range. That's the game. Because you are making your defense rolls, armor reduces damage, and the heaviest armor reduces it by 3. We'll get into the monster side of things later, but that's it. That the player character side covers the first 40 pages. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the cool special mechanics that they have and some of the cool additional things. Leveling up is easy. Every level you get a hit point. Even levels, you get an extra attribute point or 2. Odd levels, you get a gift from either balance, law, or chaos. So at most, you're looking at having characters that have in the mid-20 hit points at level 10. There's no experience points. Every time you complete a story, you write down the name of the story on your character sheet, and you need stories equal to your current level to go up. You need 1 story to hit level 2. You need 2 new stories to hit level 3. You need 3 new stories to hit level 4. And that's how it kind of ratchets up. The price determination mechanic is very cool, and the usage die mechanic is also a lot of fun. Now, for those of you who enjoy playing things besides I hit it with my sword, which is my favorite thing to play, so there's no shade being thrown there. You have a number of different magical traditions that you only come up if your characters pick the backgrounds. Sometimes they say limit these because you don't want all of them in there. The first thing we have is demonic pacts, which is very Elric. You start with several demons that you have bound into your service. The first time you use a demon in an adventure, it's free. Every time after that, you have to check your doom die. And these demons do different things. So the Demon of Ruin allows you to break a piece of equipment up to the size of a cart. The Demon of Greed allows you to create fake coins to send out into the world to buy things. And the nice thing is you start with 2, and there's no mechanic for gaining new ones as you level up. But say you're playing, and my buddy Ben has a couple of demonic pacts. And he's like, I need a new demon. I want to find a demon of wrath so I can force my ally, Mark, to go berserk. They've got a chart that you can roll on. And I could say, all right, Ben, that you know of a demon of wrath hidden in a cup used by a cult to drug their acolytes. If you go recover that cult's cup, you can have the demon of wrath bound to you. So learning new spells, learning new pacts, finding new spirits are all adventure hooks to go out and do a story. If Ben's Packmaster wants the Demon of Wrath, suddenly the entire group gets to go break into a temple to recover this cup. Spirit alliances work sort of the same way. There are ancestral spirits or spirits of nature you can call upon. There are 50 spells. You start with 4 of them. Again, how to learn new spells? Roll. Maybe it's in the hands of a skeleton, the latest victim of the Fanged Forest. Now you have to go to the Fanged Forest and recover this spell. Some of the spells are innocuous. Send a message through someone's dream. Some of them are not as innocuous. Spontaneous combustion. Your target bursts into flames and suffers continuous damage of a D4, but if you roll a 1 on your spellcasting check, everyone in the room, allies and yourself included, burst into flames. So magic's a little dangerous. You could have ties to the Fey folk, or, so that's very quorum, or twisted science. You could have automatons and mechanical things that serve you, a la Hawkmoon. And of course, it would not be an Elric game without a couple of rune weapons running around. They have ties, they have charts for you to roll on to craft 2 unique rune weapons for your world and place them out in the world. So that's the Black Sword hack. I'll put a link in the show notes because this game is great. It comes from France, so give it some time if you choose to buy it. But the art is amazing. I also have to be a little careful on which pages I jump to because it is also a very French sword and sorcery game, so content warning be advised. But we'll end with the image of the back, on the back of the book, which is sort of what you can expect from a sword and sorcery game of the Black Sword hack. This is a group of sword and sorcery adventurers. Remember, you're not playing heroic characters necessarily in sword and sorcery games. You're playing, at most likely, mercenaries. Not necessarily black-hearted, but definitely in it for the gold and the glory. So, that's the Black Sword hack. That's a little bit of Elric. That's the start of Sword and Sorcery June. I had planned Sword and Sorcery June because it was supposed to be Howard Days, and some friends of ours were going to go down to Howard Days, or Barbarian Days, which is in Cross Plains, Texas, where Robert E. Howard's house is. It's a great festival of sword and sorcery, but they, I think, wisely moved it earlier in the year, so it's not the middle of June in Central Texas. So still, Sword and Sorcery June will be going on. We're going to talk about the GM side of the Black Sword hack next week, and then we're going to talk about Hyperborea 3rd edition. And then we're going to round out the month with a look at Savage Worlds and playing Sword and Sorcery games in a system that I adore. So, if you like it, check out the Merry Mushmen. They've got a ton of great stuff. The Knock magazine comes very highly recommended from friend of the show, Ben, who's actually sitting here quietly. Well done, Ben. And it is a potpourri zine. Every page is weirdly laid out. Every page is very idiosyncratic. Every article is very idiosyncratic. And yeah, John, we should have more dice named after you. I will now refer to that as the John Doom die in my Black Sword hack, which I actually got to play once last week, and it looks like we're going to get to play it again next week. So I'm getting some good use out of this game. So to the Merry Mushmen and Kobayashi, who wrote the game, well done. This is a great game. We're going to cover all of the GM tools which are useful for any game that you want to run using sword and sorcery. This book is chock full of what I would argue are system neutral tools for running a sword and sorcery game. But that's next week's discussion. So until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen. And to tease something, it looks like in July, we will be stepping away from Crucible, and we will be going back and running some Deadlands. So it looks like Deadlands will be coming back in July to the Iconic Production channel. And I will talk more about that later in this month when I have a little bit more to share. And I will see you all next time. Have a good one.